Hello and welcome to Horror Cult Trash Over, the show that discusses all the masterpieces and trash to pieces of genre cinema. My name's Chris.
And I'm Gary.
And this week we are discussing two interesting, if rather different, films.
That we are.
Two films with two things quite clearly in common, but other than that, almost polar opposites in many respects.
This is true. As a unless you have a fancy introduction for this, I have a little bit of one written.
Oh, okay.
Do you have one?
Go for it.
Well, in the 1960s, Bette Davis's Hollywood career was in the doldrums. I don't know why, other than just Hollywood.
Because she was an older woman. Because she was
Exactly.
an older woman.
Because Hollywood and older
Simple
women.
as that.
Nearly 60 and with a long-standing reputation as a difficult person to work with, she found decent roles hard to come by in the USA. Despite the smaller paycheck on offer, she was thrilled to be offered the chance to make a movie in England, where she had wanted to make 30 years earlier, before Warner Brothers, who she was contracted to, refused to release her. She ended up making a small handful of TV films in England in mid to late 60s and 70s. What does that bring us to?
That brings us to her two films that she starred in for Hammer Films.
Yep.
Hammer Films, long respected producers of British horror films, made Christopher Lee a star, Peter Cushing, some of the best, most highly acclaimed Dracula films have come from Hammer.
And it's very topical, because it has recently been brought by someone new.
Yes.
And there is new content coming, including Dr. Jekyll, which we recently watched at Fright Fest.
Yeah, which was a fantastic film, which
also delves into hagsploitation.
It does a little bit. So yeah, let's.
But say if you got a little more about Bette Davis, because obviously I had my little introduction, but obviously
of course. I'm a huge
I love Bette Davis,
Bette Davis fan. Huge Bette Davis fan. Love every film I've ever seen her star in, even which.
Wow.
Wicked Stepmother, okay, not so great.
But she is still the best thing about it.
She is. She's pretty much the best thing about every film she's ever starred in. Real, true Hollywood actress. The grit and the glamour and the camp, and I love it, love it, love it, love it. So if you've noticed on this podcast, I tend to make choices, and Gary makes choices as well to what films we're going to cover. And I thought it's been a while since we did a Bette Davis film, and
not many chances to do Bette Davis films.
I had a look and saw that she starred in two Hammer films. I thought, oh, what a great double bill!
Yeah,
and it turns out it was, and we're going to spend a little time telling you why.
Let the Nanniversary commence.
Yeah. But, Bette Davis was known to be difficult to work with, a bit of a perfectionist, someone who wasn't afraid to be honest with how she felt to anyone around her that she worked with. And unfortunately, when you are a woman of a certain age, people don't take kindly to that.
No.
And men are, of course, allowed to. John Wayne was winning Oscars well into his 70s, and
still today, Christian Bale, Tom Cruise, the guy who directed that random murder mystery film that I can't remember the name of. Was it Amsterdam?
Oh yeah, David O. Russell.
Yeah.
Notoriously known to be difficult to work with.
So many men like that.
Yeah, and even back then, we could do a whole series on hagsploitation and what that meant for actresses in the 60s and 70s. But they were kind of moved out to pasture, really, these actresses, and left their own devices, and you're not needed anymore. And it was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? that kind of reinvigorated Bette Davis's career and
Yeah.
Joan Crawford's as well. But it led to rather similar roles playing older women in rather unflattering light.
Yeah, and whilst we can look back today and appreciate it for the camp value and how entertaining it is, exploitation, the whole concept of it at the time is just really fucked up.
Yeah, and it's born from sexism, from misogyny. Absolutely, it's all. And we love these actresses in their big screen blockbusters and their small B movie camptacular features. We love all of that. But producers and studios didn't.
No.
And unfortunately that's how you get actresses struggling to make money. Now, these are two, spoiler alert, fantastic films.
Yeah.
But they were born from Bette Davis having to travel, to move, and take a pay cut to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't seen as desirable as an actress anymore. And that's
Yeah.
it's a part of Hollywood that unfortunately we do kind of still see today, to a lesser extent, thankfully. But again, like I said, we could do a whole series of podcast episodes on it.
I mean, if you look at it compared to today, I think it still exists. It absolutely does. But also, it's nice to see the progress when you look at older ladies in horror from back then. It's exploitation. They had to be the villain. But then if you look at it now and you look at things like the Blumhouse Halloween trilogy, you look at Insidious, these are older women playing protagonists in roles that people want to see because they're playing the good girls, and they're not they're not being forced to play hideous old ladies who want to kill people or who are distraught about aging, which is sending them on a mental breakdown and causing them to kill people.
Yeah. And whatever happened to Baby Jane? Bette Davis was 54 when she made that film. That's younger than Michelle Yeoh, who just won an Oscar for playing a and they're both well-rounded characters to a certain extent, but a well-rounded, kick-ass female protagonist of a big film, and maybe it didn't start out as a big film, but it became this big phenomenal success. Everything Everywhere All at Once, obviously. I'm speaking about, and Jamie Lee Curtis still being able to win an Oscar at an age, that used to only be reserved for Meryl Streep or career Oscars,
Well, with that being said, let's talk about The Nanny, released in 1965 and the last Hammer film to be made in black and white.
I just realised we hadn't actually mentioned the name of the films until that point.
But that's your first one.
Here we go. Number one, The Nanny.
I did say the episode's the Nanniversary. So
yeah,
work it out.
That made me a little. Rewind, and that joke will be much better.
Yeah. Time magazine, and I quote, said that this film is a definitive essay on the servant problem and may be taken as an antidote by those who found Mary Poppins too sweet to stomach. I agree.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't seen Mary Poppins, but
I have seen Mary Poppins, and maybe it was a little too sweet for audiences dying to see nannies on the big screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd make a double. Should have done this as a double feature, really. This and Mary Poppins. Directed by Seth Holt, who did Nowhere to Go, Taste of Fear, Danger Man, Station 6 Sahara, True Bearing, Espionage, Court Material, Danger Rail, and Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. In his 1990 book, Fastening Your Seatbelts, Lawrence J. Quirk quotes from his interview with Seth Holt regarding working with Bette Davis, and he said, and I quote, "Oh, it was hell. Then she was always telling me how to direct. When I did it her way, she was scornful. When I stood up to her, she was hysterical. I managed some kind of middle course and got through the film and stayed calm. Once telling her she was overacting, she said, I act larger than life. That's what my audience paid me for all these years. If they wanted ordinary reality, they'd go out and talk to their grocer. I mean, yeah.
It's true. I'm sorry, Seth Holt, but you may be the director on set, but no one's sitting down at the cinema paying their, tuppence or however much it was back then, and seeing a Seth Holt film.
No,
it ain't his face on the poster.
No.
People are sat there to watch Bette Davis play the nanny.
He directs the fuck out of this film. It's very well directed.
It is.
But Bette Davis...
Stick with what you know, Seth.
Bette Davis doesn't need that much direction.
Yeah.
She very much, she knows what she's doing.
Exactly.
And, she always, no matter what character she plays, she fully immerses herself within the role and she completely sticks to it. She never, there's never a moment where you're like, oh, that's just, that's Bette Davis. It's like, no, you're believing you're watching this character.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I mean, the accents, I'm not sure.
I thought her accent was really good.
In both these films, I wasn't sure what she was going for. I'm not sure what...
Posh British. That's what I was getting.
Okay, I thought it was maybe that mid-Atlantic.
But it wasn't too far from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Yeah.
Was she going for British in that?
No.
But she did say, she has gone on record saying she loves the British accent.
Yeah, so famously, classic Hollywood, and Katharine Hepburn is the biggest example of this. There was that mid-Atlantic accent where it wasn't quite American and not quite British.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit of that. Yes, yeah, and Leslie Scottish.
Well, yeah, apart from Phenomena.
But yeah, Seth Holt, stick with what you know. You've directed a good film, but Bette Davis overacting this film? I don't think so.
She doesn't.
If anything, it's scaled back.
Yeah.
To be fair, and we'll obviously talk about that, but okay, Seth.
It's written by Jimmy Sangster, who's written both of the films we're talking about today. Oh. He also did Dracula 19...
Oh, there's another connection then. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
He also did Dracula 1958, Dracula Prince of Darkness, The Mummy 1959, Fear in the Night, The Horror of Frankenstein, The Revenge of Frankenstein, Maniac, the 1963 film, Phobia, The Devil and Max Devlin, The Snorkel, and more. So he's definitely a Hammer mainstay.
Yeah.
And... also, someone Bette Davis unsuccessfully tried to seduce.
Oh, wow.
His wife was fuming and said if he works with her again, she's going to divorce him.
Oh, wow.
He worked with her again, so continue listening to find out how that ended up. It's based on the novel by Miriam Modell. And it had a budget of $1.3 million, and it made $2 million worldwide.
Oh, okay.
So not a big success.
No. The novel, what I read about the novel, and there's not much on it, I haven't read the novel, but seemingly it was a little racier than this.
Yeah.
And I think they changed a few things round.
It doesn't need to. I mean, the film, anyway. I mean, I don't know about the novel, but the film doesn't need to be any racier than it is. No. I find with novels, and we've discussed page to screen a lot on the podcast, the novels can get away with a lot more than the film. So it tends to always be that way because literature, I mean, books have been banned in the past, but I don't think there's necessarily an age restriction for books, which is crazy, really. Yeah.
I mean, I wonder when I bought, like, J.G. Ballard's Crash. When did I first read that? Oh, could explain a few things.
Should we,
Would I even allowed to buy that? Like, I mean, I don't think there's age restrictions on books.
No.
Not really.
No.
I mean, I read The Ice Storm at quite a young age. Oh, wow. Okay.
Should we talk about his own film?
Yes, of course, in a section we like to call, Hey, I only really care about Bette Davis, but I think I know you from somewhere else too.
Well, as you know by now, Betty Davis is in this
You tell I hadn't practiced that.
as Nanny.
Not being able to read all of a sudden.
Of course, Betty Davis, star of All About Eve, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Dark Victory, Now Voyager, Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, Death on the Nile, Burnt Offerings, and more. A few bits about Betty Davis during this film. She forced co-star Jill Bennett to walk behind her at the dog track one night because she thought she was underdressed. She worked with the flu and would drink out of her co-star's glasses and allegedly coughed in their faces.
Oh, God. Allegedly.
Her daughter, Barbara Merrill, felt that there was more to her mother's production delay in flu. Costume designer Rosemary Burrows had proposed lightweight cotton dresses as worn by modern nannies, whereas Davis wanted a traditional old-fashioned wool uniform with white collar, which were by then very difficult to find. Davis was able to leave her hotel room once one of those outfits was located, just as her daughter predicted. So, did the flu exist? Who knows?
I think with a lot of these stories, you take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
It's the classic sort of Hollywood gossip.
Yeah.
Where half the time it was completely made up or deliberately trying to be salacious. And again, a lot of it was quite sexist and misogynistic, and women always came out the worst with these gossip mongers and everything. What I find interesting is that if that is true, and Bette Davis refused to film without having the traditional costume, she's 100% correct.
Yeah.
This character of the nanny would not dress in a modern attire.
No.
The whole point is that this woman has dedicated her whole life to other people's children.
Yeah.
You know, and she hasn't married, she hasn't this, that, and the other. That's what she's done for all those years. So she wouldn't change her attire.
No.
She wouldn't. She's stuck in the past. She's stuck in a moment. She's, dowdy and old-fashioned.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Yeah. Just because it was more difficult to get hold of, Bette Davis was right. 100% correct. As always, 'cause she's a fantastic actress.
The role was originally intended for Greer Garson, who first accepted then declined, saying the script would not be good for her career. Jimmy Sangster, who the writer of the film, later said, "I went to Santa Fe, met with Greer, and she said she liked the script and everything was fine. When I got back to London, we had a message from Los Angeles saying that Greer Garson didn't think the script would do her career much good. I didn't like to say she didn't have a career in those days."
Yeah. So Greer Garson, much like Bette Davis, a huge, well-known actress, an Oscar winner. But I do believe by that point she wasn't making many films. No. Certainly not bitten by the exploitation bug, though.
No.
Which I'm assuming she was nervous of doing. But again, when it comes to filmography, it does stop at a certain point.
Yeah.
And dwindles, should I say? But she was very much like Bette Davis, and again, I could go on about it for a long time about how the actresses were actually the biggest box office draws, but treated the worst or thrown out like day old milk.
Yeah.
When they were deemed too old.
Wendy Craig plays Virginia Fane. She was in Butterflies, The Servant, Not in Front of the Children, The Worst Witch, Emmerdale, Doctors, Waterloo Road, I'll Never Forget What's His Name, and more.
Yeah, so Wendy Craig, most famous, I believe, for the British sitcom Butterflies. Which I think was a sitcom, even though it was about her wanting to have an affair. But
next up we have James Villiers, who plays Bill Fane. He was in Repulsion, For Your Eyes Only, Some Girls Do, Murder at the Gallop, The Damned, The Tichborne Claimant, Uncovered, Let Him Have It, and more.
Oh, some interesting. We've seen Repulsion, haven't we?
We have.
Yeah, yeah. So very, very British. Very British.
Yeah.
There's no random sitcom that he's been in.
No. James Villiers' Monobrow plays Bill Fane's Monobrow.
I didn't know he had a mustache, though, didn't he?
Yeah.
Maybe it fell.
One above, one below.
At one point. It's parallel.
Finally, Jill Bennett plays Aunt Pen, and she was also in For Your Eyes Only. So, you know, they're obviously... The director of For Your Eyes Only really enjoyed The Nanny, clearly.
Yeah, yeah.
Moulin Rouge, the 1952 version. Lady Jane, The Shelter in Sky, Hawks, Britannia Hospital, Full Circle, I Want What I Want, Julius Caesar, and more. Bennett says Bette Davis gave her one important acting tip: make love to the furniture, and she does. She definitely does during one scene. So good on her for getting that advice. We should also, he was only in Dr. Dolittle and Superstition, but we should also mention William Dix, who plays Joey Fane, mainly because he's, I mean, the other main character.
Yeah.
He was actually only 10, the same age as his character, when he was making his film, so he actually couldn't attend the film's British premiere because of the X rating.
Oh. That is weird. I mean, it's like...
So strange.
I'm assuming Linda Blair wasn't allowed... Oh, no,
Yeah.
that would have been an R rating.
Well, it's America, so... It's
America, so yeah. That's weird, isn't it? Pamela Franklin, just to add, played Bobby Medman, the girl upstairs. She was one of the children in The Innocents.
Okay.
One of the children in The Prime and Miss Jean Brodie. She was in Food of the Gods and Soon the Darkness and a few other very British film, including the new Flipper's Adventure. Or Flipper's New Adventure, should I say. Do you remember Flipper?
I do remember Flipper. I do. Preferred Free Willy, but I remember Flipper.
Did Flipper have a 90s?
I'm sure it did. Yeah, it definitely did.
It was definitely a TV series.
Yeah, it definitely had a film. Shall we talk about our feature presentation? Our first feature presentation?
Yes.
Bette Davis. You've seen her before. But never like this. Never before in a role like the nanny.
I'm frightened, Nanny. I'm frightened. Being a nanny is based on trust. It is so important that parents trust us. It's not myself I'm thinking about. It's all those nannies who have devoted their lives to other people's children. And who will look after Madam? Without Nanny, she'd be helpless.
So we open with Bette Davis as Nanny, going about her chores and feeding some birds before entering a frightfully posh home in London. Is this in London?
Yeah.
Yeah. Her eyebrows, they are thick.
Yeah.
They are caterpillars. I mean, I've never seen Bette Davis eyebrows.
No.
A little distracting, I'm not gonna lie. Maybe that's, why I didn't notice the monobrow, because I was too distracted by Bette Davis's...
I suppose it's a lot for when they're in the same scenes together. I love the happy score that's playing here. You think you're going to be watching a nice family drama. She's just there feeding the ducks, feeding the birds, having a nice stroll with this happy score. It just gives you a false sense of security, which is great. It
does, yeah. I don't think it's a deliberate thing, but, comparing it to Mary Poppins, we have that lovely feed the birds, tuppence a bag song, very sweet, and that business is. I think it's kind of a play on that.
And for the most part, the film's called The Nanny, you're gonna think something's up, but she plays it straight for the most part, and it's quite a while through. I think it's like towards the start of the second act where she starts acting really creepy. I mean, before that, she's just a pleasant nanny.
Yeah,
and the kid's a little shit who's playing up.
Yeah, to a certain degree, which makes her creepier.
Yeah,
because you kind of know something's up.
Yeah,
it'd be a very boring film if nothing was up. So something's not quite right. So the fact that she does play it straight and she does play the sweet nanny, is actually creepier.
Yeah.
Because you see the trailer, you see the poster. The
Mhm.
idea is that, oh my god, look at this grotesque old woman.
Yeah.
Look how she has aged before your eyes.
Mhm.
How awful, how terrible, what
Yeah.
a monster.
Yeah.
So you know something's up. But I do really love the way that Bette Davis plays the character
Yeah.
throughout the film, especially in comparison to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane,
Mhm.
because she was very over the top.
Yeah.
From the beginning in Whatever Happened to Baby
Mhm.
Jane. That's the whole point. But she's not in The Nanny. And
No.
she knows how to play it. And she's not just recreating Baby Jane.
No.
She's creating her own character.
Mhm.
Nanny.
Yeah.
So at the home, Virginia Wayne, Wendy Craig, is in hysterics whilst being berated by her husband Bill, James Villiers. She's nervous at the return of her son Joey. And he good old Bill, the asshole, says, "Pull yourself together and put some makeup on.
Sort your makeup out.
You look terrible." I'm paraphrasing.
But he's oh my god, he's horrible. Like he's the one that you can't stand
Mm.
because he's a fucking dick.
Well, yeah. She is, and it's a theme of the film, parenting. It's called The Nanny, so you know a big theme of the film is parents or lack of, or you know, all that business, raising children. And she's hysterical and she's quite annoying. There's no doubt that her hysterics would get quite annoying, but he's also highly a dick. Like,
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? A dick, basically. He's berating her. He's not helping the situation. And again, he's fairly absent.
Yeah.
And that'll come across later. But he's not a great parent himself or a great husband.
No. Their son Joey he spent 2 years at school for emotionally disturbed children after being blamed for drowning his younger sister Susie.
Yeah, so clearly Virginia is dealing with her grief. And like we said, her husband is a grade A prick. Virginia asks Nanny to go with Bill to pick Joey up from the school. It's school, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was a little confused by Betty's accent. Like I said earlier, I thought she was going for a little bit of Irish, potentially. But whatever. It just doesn't. It's not bad.
No.
I just don't know what it's meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
So Virginia, who is prone to melancholy and crying spells, still grieving the death of Susie, just can't face it, and that's kind of her throughout the film. It's like, I just can't deal with it. I just can't face. What is it you can't face? But you know what I mean. So the school's headmaster informs Joey's father that his son harbours an intense dislike of middle-aged women. Bit like film producers in Hollywood. This extends to Nanny, whom Joey distrusts and disrespects. And we quite shockingly have Joey pretending to hang himself in his room as a trick on Mrs. Griggs, the middle-aged woman who works at the school.
Mm-hmm.
She goes to collect him, and he has rigged it so it looks like he's hung himself.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I mean, even like just before though, you get the flashback of Susie with Virginia saying, you know, oh, this and that, what I want to be when I grow up, and then cuts back to her breaking down. It's kind of like, okay, so this is actually really dark.
It is.
Mean, you know, you got this kid who's dead now, talking about what she wants to be when she grows up, and then another kid pretending to hang himself. It's like, oh my god. And that's only within the opening 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's shortly after the nice scene at the park with the happy score and Bette Davis feeding the birds.
And the whole premise of the film is, has Bette Davis murdered a child?
Yeah.
And will she murder another one?
Yeah.
Which is very dark.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when Joey returns home, he refuses to eat the meals that Nanny prepares because he suspects she may be poisoning him. He abandons the room Nanny has decorated for him and moves to one with a strong lock on its door. Um, it's a strange one because we look at things from our own perspectives, and this kid is fucking annoying.
Mm-hmm.
But also, the mum's annoying, the dad's annoying,
Yeah.
and the only person that isn't is Nanny.
Yeah.
She's actually coming across quite pleasant and quite nice. But like I said, the whole premise is, has she murdered a child? Is she a murderer?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's and I think it's deliberate.
Yeah.
Actually, I do think it's quite deliberate. In the sense of making the nanny an almost sympathetic character at times. Spoiler alert: she is in some way responsible for Susie's death. Nanny comforts Virginia as she did when she cared for her and her sister Pen when they were children. Pen is fabulous in her fur coat.
Oh, she's an absolute queen.
Looking like Carol Channing. And we learn that she has a weak heart from a childhood illness. But she's still a bit of a lush.
Yeah.
Still likes to drink and a party and such. But she has to look after her heart. I wonder if that comes back later on in the film. I found it interesting, the idea that Nanny in many ways looks after Virginia more than she looks after Joey. Because Joey's been away for 2 years.
Yeah.
And Nanny's still employed.
Mm-hmm.
So who has she been nannying for 2 years? Well, Virginia.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting part of the film. And when we talk about what we think the film is about, after all the evidence, we can discuss that more. Joey refuses to have a bath due to the door not having a lock. He's fearful that Nanny will enter the bathroom. And Virginia tells Nanny not to enter the bathroom and then asks Nanny to brush her hair. And she brushes her hair very much like she's a child. And Virginia's telling her, well, this, that, and the other. Like she's the child and Nanny's the nanny. And in many ways, Joey's the parent. He doesn't need a nanny. He doesn't need anyone to look after him. Also, the idea of a child being fearful of someone entering the bathroom whilst they're having a bath is quite disturbing.
Yeah.
And again, it's quite a dark film when you really look at it. Joey meets his upstairs neighbour, Bobby Medman, the 14-year-old daughter of a doctor. They meet on the fire escape.
They do.
And she bets him a fag that she has a boyfriend who's there to see her.
Just to clear up for our American listeners, a fag means a cigarette in the UK.
Cigarette.
They're not betting on homosexuals.
No. He'll show... Her boyfriend's going to show that he's there to see her by tying his laces, which he does. But it's obvious that he's tying his laces not because she's his girlfriend, but because he wants to look up her skirt.
Yes.
Joey says, he's looking up your skirt, the dirty old git.
For our American listeners, I'm not quite sure what a git means.
Git. I don't know, git.
It's an insult of some sort.
Yeah. Weird. It's a weird scene. The idea that, because this man is certainly way too old to be looking up a 14-year-old skirt. And yeah, so yeah. Less said about that, the better, I think.
He tells her the plot of the film and grabs her a cigarette.
He does.
So, Bill's gone away now, the father. Bill is a Queen's messenger, and he's frequently away on business. So, he's flying away for a few days after seeing Joey's hostility towards Nanny fail to subside. So, best option, go and do some work and fuck off from the family. Let the mother deal with it.
Absent father. They've got a lovely posh house.
Yeah.
And they've got a live-in nanny, but the father's absent.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, we don't see him
Again. That's it.
in the film.
Yeah.
Joey and Bobby almost drop a flower box on the milkman's head, and Nanny defends him. So the milkman calls her a silly old cow.
A silly old cow!
And Bobby doesn't really believe Joey's story.
No.
And she reminds him that she stuck up for you, didn't she, Mary Poppins?
Yeah, she's very impressed by how much she stuck up for him. And she thinks that Nanny would never be scared of anything. So Joey wants to prove her wrong.
Yeah. He persuades Bobby to witness a cruel prank. He places a doll face down in the bath. He opens the tap and persuades Nanny to turn the spigot off. She is aghast when she sees the floating doll because it reminds her of finding Susie after she drowned in the bath.
Virginia's fuming.
Virginia is absolutely fuming.
That's the cruelest thing I've ever heard of.
And it is very cruel. It is very cruel. Because it's this weird thing where Joey is accusing Nanny of murdering Susie. Deliberately so, murdering Susie.
Yeah.
But then making it look like an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't, it's a strange one. And I think it is a deliberate thing by the filmmakers to sort of be like, well, what is the truth?
Yeah.
And a lot of the advertising, and of course a lot of the advertising focuses on Nanny probably being a murderer.
Yeah.
But I think the film itself plays more into who do we believe of this incident, you know?
This is at the turning point now. So this is when it becomes obvious that she is the psychopath that Joey's saying she is. So she's...
To a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, she cooks him a steak and kidney pie.
It's definitely a trigger for her, isn't it?
Yeah.
So she cooks him a steak and kidney pie, yeah.
He refuses to eat it, but she spoon feeds it to Virginia, who then falls ill and is taken to the hospital. So Nanny has laced it with poison. Joey's blamed for the incident because there's a bottle of poison found beneath his pillow. It's like, okay, well, I mean, he's not going to cook a steak and kidney pie, is he?
But he could put the poison in when she wasn't looking.
True.
So there's no evidence to suggest, because the bottle is found under his pillow. And we know now, having watched the whole film, that Nanny was the one to leave it under his pillow.
Yeah.
But we don't know that whilst we're watching.
No.
So again, we are kind of, well, who do we believe? What, it's unlikely, but there's no evidence to suggest that Joey did or didn't put the poison in the steak and kidney pie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming he would have had chance whilst it was cooking and Nanny was doing something else. Like Gary said, Joey is blamed for the incident and Aunt Pen comes to babysit.
Yeah.
Aunt Pen, being the queen that she is, quickly makes it very clear that she'd rather be anywhere else than having to babysit. She said, "This is a terrible bore, Nanny, I tell you."
Bobby...
I just feel like she genuinely couldn't care less that her sister's been poisoned.
No, she just doesn't want to be there.
And
just be out of town, having a nice time.
And I do find a lot of people, particularly Joey, and to a certain extent Bobby, are very flippant about everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that, potentially Nanny is a murderer.
Yeah.
She has killed and she will kill again.
Yeah.
They're quite flippant about it. And it's like some gossip about someone who works down Sainsbury's having an affair, when really it's quite serious. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that is. Why do you think people are quite flippant about the whole thing. Like Aunt Pen is like, I just could not care less.
Yeah.
That my sister's been poisoned.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't want to bingo tonight.
Yeah, if that's a stylistic choice, I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if it's the acting choices or. Yeah.
But it's the dialogue itself, isn't it, as well? I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah. Bobby tells Joey that she and her dad don't believe that he didn't poison his mum, but she says that if he is telling the truth, he needs to find a way to prove that Nanny did it. He wakes Aunt Pen up in the middle of the night and he's dripping wet and claims that Nanny tried to drown him, so she slaps him and starts calling for Nanny!
Well, she does, because she gets a little overexcited, doesn't she?
She does, and that dialogue, that line delivery is amazing.
It is. So it's in the trailer, isn't it? Of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nanny!
so she needs her medication because she got too excited. So Joey goes up to Bobby's room and tells her all about it. She doesn't believe him again. And then he tells Bobby that Nanny killed Susie, and then this is when we get the flashbacks to show us how it happened.
Yes. So in the flashback, Nanny leaves the house for an appointment. Joey is playing by himself with his father's model railway. Susie threatens to tell their parents that Joey's being disobedient because he's not supposed to be playing with the model railway. She wants to play with the railway too, but he tells her to piss off. She goes into the bathroom to play and accidentally drops her doll in the bath. She tries to retrieve it by reaching behind the shower curtain, but falls into the bath and knocks herself out. Nanny enters the bathroom after returning home and absent-mindedly turns on the tap by reaching through the closed shower curtain without looking inside. Unable to summon Susie for her bath, Nanny searches for her. When she returns to the bathroom, she finds Susie floating face down in the water. Her mind snaps and she bathes the girl's lifeless body. Joey witnesses this, but Nanny does not see him. Eventually, she realizes that Joey knows that she accidentally caused Susie's death, and she subsequently blames Joey for accidentally drowning his sister in the bath. Everyone believes her, and he's sent away for 2 years.
Yeah, and during that, we get Joey saying to his sister, "Go play with your dolls. That's all girls can do anyway."
Yeah, unfortunately, it's again,
The real villain here.
The real villain is sexism and misogyny, because also Virginia, when she was telling Joey off earlier in the film, "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. I'm going to have to wait till your father gets home, and then I'll see what he has to say." It was like, girl, come on, make a decision.
Yeah.
I know it's the 60s, but you don't need your husband to make every choice for you.
Yeah.
Get it together. So, yes,
So then we know
the patriarchy is the real villain of the Nanny.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that being revealed, she didn't actually kill anyone.
No.
On purpose.
No. It's very dark.
Yeah.
It's a very haunting scene and image, actually. But it kind of paints Nanny as a sympathetic character.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. And I think it's very interesting. And later on, we find out more about why she was so absent-minded about the whole thing. And again, adds to her being, in some ways, a very sympathetic character. Not one that was painted by the marketing.
No.
Which I quite like sometimes. I like the surprise. I genuinely felt that this film would be about a killer nanny.
Yeah.
I just genuinely, I thought that. And it's not necessarily.
No. Bobby's dad finds Joey in the apartment and takes him back home. Joey locks himself in his room whilst Penn rants to Nanny about him. Nanny informs her that Bill will be home tomorrow, and she says, "I've got a few things to tell him about that monster he's bred." Penn wakes during the night and finds Nanny standing outside Joey's door holding a pillow. Nanny claims that the pillow is an extra one for Joey, but Penn remembers she would not allow her and Virginia to have pillows when they were children. So she suspects that Nanny's going to suffocate him, and Penn asks her what happened earlier when Joey emerged from the bathroom soaking wet. She gets overexcited and has a heart attack, but Nanny snatches her heart medicine away from her.
So now Nanny is a killer,
Yeah.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she has snapped.
Yeah.
I don't believe that she tried to drown Joey.
No.
And I think maybe that's why he was so flippant about it.
Mm.
Because I think he's trying to get her back in a way for, number one, putting the blame on him, and number two, what she did to Susie earlier in the film. Earlier, when she drowned. So I do think that's his way of getting back at her. But then I do think that she was going to try and smother him with the pillow, because she's completely lost it now, due to, well, him, really. It's complicated. It can be interpreted in a few ways, actually.
Yeah.
I think, if he hadn't have been so awful to her,
well,
playing that trick on her.
Yeah, I fully believe it's the trick that made her snap.
And then it sort of continued, and grew since that moment.
Yeah. I fully believe that's what caused it. So I mean, I think she could have tried to drown him, considering it's after that happened.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, as Penn lays dying, Nanny tells her that she was a single mother who works 2 jobs, who loves her kids and never stops, with gentle hands and the heart of a fighter. She was a survivor. She was also called to the deathbed of her daughter Janet, who died from an illegal abortion. So this is also a cautionary tale on why abortion should be legal, women shouldn't be forced to go to shady back alley abortion clinics.
Yeah, to a certain extent. But I actually think it's about... Well, Nanny, after going to the deathbed of her daughter, Janet, already shaken, she returned home to find Susie's body, which drove her over the edge.
She
was why she was absent-minded.
Yeah. It's a really disturbing scene. She hallucinates that Susie's still alive for a short while while saving her, and then it'll switch between Nat and her being dead face down, and Bette Davis is just fantastic.
This is Bette Davis acting, so it's not over the top, but it's more than she's had to give for the rest of the film, and this is excellent acting. It really is. But I think the main theme is absent parents. Nanny, she's berated by the doctor, she's scolded by the doctor for neglecting her own child whilst looking after other people's children. And her daughter didn't want to raise an illegitimate child like Nanny did, and therefore wanted the abortion. So I feel like the message is Nanny was embarrassed by having an illegitimate child, and therefore was absent from Janet's life. Looking after other children that she deemed more fit to look after, because they were posh and not illegitimate. And so the neglect that Janet had with an absent parent led to her not wanting to do the same, and therefore getting an illegal abortion. Now that illegal abortion actually set off the events in a way that led directly to Susie's death. Susie's death was because Nanny couldn't get the afternoon off. Because Virginia was and Bill, to a certain extent, Bill's the husband, right? Were so interested in their own lives that they couldn't give the nanny an afternoon off and look after their own children. So, in a big convoluted way, and I hope that makes sense, it's ultimately about being there to look after your children.
Yeah.
And being an absent parent leads to all of this.
Yeah, no,
That's
absolutely.
how I perceived
No,
it.
it does make sense.
Which I think is so much more interesting than a killer nanny.
Yes.
Now, I would have been thoroughly entertained if Bette Davis pulled out a knife and started becoming a slasher villain. Now, on another level, but I think it's really incredible. And I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment. You know, it's one up for debate. But I think it's so interesting to have what could have been a throwaway exploitation horror film have these levels to it.
Yeah, definitely. I think early Hammer definitely really thrived on stories like this. I mean, if you look at something like Never Take Sweet from a Stranger as well, there's these lesser known earlier Hammer films where when you're not dealing with monsters and fantasy worlds, there's some real thought provoking, well made stories here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Hammer is synonymous with British horror, but not all of their films are horror. And I actually wouldn't consider this a straight up horror film.
I think it's got elements in there. I wouldn't call it a straight up
psychological thriller, I suppose I would describe it as. Really. With some horror elements, but for it to be horror, the nanny would have to really be a straight up villain to many extents, and I don't think that's the case. Well, she is now. She has actually just murdered someone, and she was tried to murder, but she's got a good reason for it.
Yeah.
Why she lost her mind.
Yeah. She explains to Penn's corpse, she's now dead, that she could not let Joey live for fear that someone may believe his story and put her livelihoods at risk, because people entrust their children to nannies.
Yeah, so she thinks she's speaking on behalf of all the nannies. And I think, again, it's interesting because she hasn't actually got a name. She's only called Nanny.
Yeah.
People only ever refer to her as Nanny. Even the grown people, you know, even someone like Bill, who wasn't raised by her, calls her Nanny. She's an older woman that is defined solely by her occupation. And that occupation is to look after other people's children. And I think that's, again, highly interesting. And like you said earlier, you know, I can't remember who it was, but a statement on the service industry.
Yeah. It was a review of the film, yeah. Nanny tries to enter Joey's bedroom, but his alarm system wakes him and he tries to escape. She grabs him by the ankle, causing him to fall and knock his head on the side and rendering him unconscious. She carries him into the bath and fills it with water, but soon the memory of finding Susie's body returns and she pulls him from the bath. So, again, you know, she had the intention of doing it, but she didn't do it.
No, she can't go through with it.
Which is really interesting.
It is. I think it's also interesting that the only person that actually is killed in the film is the childless aunt.
Yeah.
Who can't be bothered.
Yeah.
I think that's another morality sort of tale. Well, Susie, yeah, I understand that. Neglect killed Susie to a certain degree, but the only person that's killed by Nanny directly and deliberately is Aunt Pen.
Yeah.
The lush, childless, self-centered one who can't be asked to look after her nephew.
Yeah.
I think that's another sort of morality statement there too.
Dr. Medman visits Virginia's hospital room and explains that Nanny is mentally ill and will receive long-term care. Virginia discovers Joey's at the hospital and would like to see her. She tells him she knows everything about Nanny, and Joey is no longer sullen. Instead, he hugs his mother and behaves like a joyful 10-year-old boy.
Oh,
we got over that so fast.
The evil has been defeated.
And that's the Nanny.
That's the Nanny. Way more layered than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Really interesting morality tale. I really enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed, and Bette Davis, of course, phenomenal, phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's a shame that back then, and well, now as well, the Academy would never look at a performance like that.
No,
When realistically, she fully deserved to have at least been nominated for some awards.
I think there's a nuance to that sort of performance. She downplays it a lot, but doesn't go too far when it's asked for her to be a little more upbeat.
Yeah.
It's not the word I'm looking for, but you know
No,
what
no,
I
you
mean.
Yeah. So for ratings, I give it 9 bets for SIGs out of 10.
Am I going to get into trouble for using that? I'm allowed to use that word, aren't I?
Did you do the same?
No. I put 8 Bette Davis caterpillar eyebrows out of
Oh.
10. No, you bet for 6.
Well, bets are fags.
But she doesn't. Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, I'm not going to get cancelled. It is an actual word.
It is your word. It is your word.
But it is an actual word for cigarettes that we use here.
And even if it isn't, we own it. It's,
Okay.
you know. Masterpiece, trash, basic, or a camp whole bunch of fun. It's closer to Masterpiece for me.
Yes.
Out of all those.
It's very, very good.
Yeah.
It's a great film.
It's available on video on demand and DVD. And if you enjoy this, I recommend checking out Run, which is another suspense-filled psychological thriller with Sarah Paulson.
Nice. Yeah, it was a great film. If you enjoyed this, I recommend checking out The Babadook.
I mean, please give your explanation.
Is scary entity, is it real or is it not? Is this kid deliberately being annoying? Is he not? Yeah, I think it's just a similar energy, and I like the idea of Bette Davis playing the Babadook.
Could you imagine her in a top hat? and
Exactly.
long jacket?
I think maybe
She's also a gay icon.
exactly.
Like Bette Davis, so.
Yeah.
And that is that concludes our first feature presentation. Next up, we have The Anniversary from 1968, directed by Alvin Rakoff, who did Shades of Green, Say Hello to Yesterday, A Voyage Round My Father, A Haunted Harmony, A Dance to the Music of Time, and more. But it was directed by him for 10 days.
It was.
And then it was directed by Roy Ward Baker, who did A Night to Remember, Asylum, The Monster Club, Two Left Feet, Death Becomes Me, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, Mission Monte Carlo, Scars of Dracula, The Vault of Horror, and more. Shooting began on 3rd of May 1967. After work on 8th of May, Bette Davis made her complaint about then-director Alvin Rakoff using television techniques to mark out the actor's moves and demanded his replacement. She then refused to turn up for work for the next 2 days, causing resentment amongst the cast who actually liked Rakoff. Davis cost the production 6 days of unusable footage and 2 days where production was at a standstill, and he was eventually replaced by Roy Ward Baker. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So she didn't want to be shot like she was in a TV movie.
No.
So the resentment from the cast towards her in the film, very real.
Yeah. Maybe it's a bit of life imitating art.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Written again by Jimmy Sangster, and after the Nanny, as we know, Sangster's wife said she would not only leave him, but she'd leave the country if he ever worked with Bette Davis again. She duly left for their home in the south of France on the day that Davis arrived for this shoot and remained there for the duration. She didn't leave him, but she did leave the country. According to Hammer historian Marcus Hearn, Davis yet again renewed her unsuccessful campaign to seduce him.
I feel like he was maybe quite a bit younger than her. But yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't think Bette Davis was a proponent for the sanctity of marriage.
No.
Really, she was married a few times herself, wasn't
Yeah.
she? So, right, I see.
This is This is based on a play by Bill McIlraith. Bill
Yeah.
McIlraith.
Yeah.
Made on a budget of $1.4 million, and it only made $1.3 million at the box office. People just didn't want camp in 1968, clearly.
Apparently not. But yeah, it's very obvious it was based on a play.
It is.
It's very, very clear. It's, you know, one, what's it called? Location.
One location.
Just one location.
Yeah.
And yeah, very...
one set of characters.
Very talky, very wordy. It's definitely based on a play. Which I love. I love.
This is quite the change in tone.
Very much so. This is colour.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that the Nanny is in black and white.
Yeah.
And this is in colour, because I think it's quite on point.
Yeah.
That they are like that.
Should we talk about who's in it?
Yes, in a section we like to call Hey, I Know You.
First up, we have Bette Davis, of course, as
Of
Mrs.
course.
Taggart, but we've already spoke about her.
Yes.
This whole episode is about her. So we have Sheila Hancock as Karen Taggart. She was in The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, Take a Girl Like You, Three Men and a Little Lady, Carry On Cleo, EastEnders, Casualty, The Wildcats of St. Trinian's, and more. Whilst researching this, I didn't realise how many St. Trinian's films there were. Fucking hell.
Oh, there were loads, yeah. Not just the Girls Aloud one.
Not just the Girls Aloud one.
Yeah, Sheila Hancock, very much a mainstay of British film and theatre and TV. She was married to the guy who played Inspector Morse.
Okay.
So, well known, she's had a very long career.
Inspector Morse.
Yeah, what was his name? John...
Inspector Morse.
That was his name. Was it?
No, it wasn't.
Oh.
I have no idea.
John Thor. Yeah.
Um,
I don't think Americans will know what the hell I'm going on about.
James Cousins plays Henry Taggart. He was in The Man with the Golden Gun, Gandhi, Melody, Sphinx, Coronation Street, Emmerdale,
Yes.
Woof, The First Great Train Robbery, and more.
Yeah. Another sort of British mainstay, probably not as famous, but
No.
yeah, the usual ones. You know how in America, when we talk about films that American actors and actresses have been in, and Murder, She Wrote always pops up.
Yeah.
I think for the UK ones, it's always going to be
Soaps.
It's the soaps. It's Coronation Street, EastEnders, Emmerdale,
Yeah.
and maybe Casualty every once in a while.
Jack Headley plays Terry Taggart, and unbelievably, he's in For Your Eyes Only.
Oh God! Everyone's in that fucking film. Is it even a good film?
I mean, I remember enjoying it.
Everyone on my letterbox hates it.
It's been a long time since I watched it. He was also in The New York Ripper, so not so much a British mainstay.
Bloody hell!
Of Human Bondage
Excuse me.
with Bette Davis,
Oh wow!
I believe.
That was he?
Yeah,
No, or was it a remake?
he may have been in a remake.
He may have
He
been.
may have been. Cold It's.
Because yeah, that would have made him a lot older.
Yeah.
That would have made him a lot of. I mean, that of Human Bondage is from the 30s, so yeah, I feel it's a remake or a retelling of the story.
Cold It's. Only Fools and Horses. Lawrence of Arabia. Hello, Hello.
Oh wow!
Plot to Kill Hitler, and more.
Hello, classic.
Yeah.
I think.
For the Straits, yeah.
Is it? Do you remember ever watching
No,
Hello?
No, I don't.
I don't know. I probably hasn't aged very well.
No. And neither has this film, but there we go.
Yeah.
Christian Roberts plays Tom Taggart, and he was in Twisted Nerve, To Sir with Love, The Avengers, not that one, Klotchmurra.
The Adventurers.
No, he was in The Avengers as well.
Was
TV
he?
Show.
Oh, that
That
Avengers.
Avengers.
Diana Rigg. Excuse me.
Colossia Merle, The Bill, UFO, The Last Valley, The Persuaders, The Mind of Mr. Soames, and more.
Right. Okay. You're missing his most famous role.
What's that?
Merry Christmas, Drake and Josh.
Oh. Oh, wow. How did I miss that? I always find random Christmas films.
You do.
Is there anyone else you
I
have?
can't believe it's in Merry Christmas, Drake and Josh. How is that even? We need to watch it now just to see him in it. Sorry. That's so random. You look
random.
at his, I'm assuming he plays some random British person who sounds very British and tells people off in a very British way. But going from To Sir with Love and The Anniversary and Twisted Nerve, nothing else American, and then he goes over to America and it's like, yeah, I'm going to be in Drake and Josh.
Big Drake and Josh fan.
Do you think he was just available? Like he was gone to like Disneyland or something? And like, we need a very British man who's going to tell people off in a very British way.
Well, I assume
I'm only assuming.
I assume it didn't do very well, so I assume that was his break into America and it just didn't go any further.
What, like 40 years afterwards?
Well, it's never too late to stop. You never stop trying. It's never too late.
So we have Elaine Taylor, who plays Shirley Blair, and she was in Casino Royale, not that one, the earlier one, that everyone hates. She was in All the Way Up, Lock Up Your Daughters.
Look up your daughters.
Lock Up Your Daughters.
It's a strange request.
Half a Sixpence, and Diamonds for Breakfast. Now, Diamonds for Breakfast. I'd like to just show Gary the poster.
It looks amazing.
Where a young lady wearing a rather short dress is kissing a gentleman.
No, hang on. You left out the best part. Her boots.
And those big. Was I finished?
Well, I thought you were.
With her big, shiny PVC black knee-high boots. She's hanging off a window ledge, giving a young man a kiss, and I think there's a cat there as well. So that's been added to the watch list.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's it really. A lot of the cast, obviously apart from Bette Davis, were part of the stage play, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's get into our second feature presentation.
We'd like you to meet our sweet, warm-hearted, lovable mom.
God! What kind of a woman do you think I am?
Put her on a bonfire, tie her to a stake.
Mom is having an anniversary, and the whole family got together to discuss what to do for her. A party? No, we gave her that last year. Champagne? No, not enough. Fireworks? No, cliché. This year, we decided to do something really special for our mom.
This time we really kill her. My God, she's scummy.
This one starts with opening credits set to the anniversary song by the new Vaudeville band.
Yeah, frightfully upbeat music, isn't it?
And we see Shirley, who visits a building site looking for a Tom Taggart. And she meets Henry, Tom's brother, and informs him that she's Tom's fiancée. He informs his brother Terry about it, and he is fuming. He's like, two-faced, conniving little bastard. And he says he's going to warn Karen, his wife, about it.
Yeah, he's absolutely... We don't know why he's fuming, but he's absolutely fuming that Shirley and Tom are engaged. And he pisses off. And it's the end of the workday now. And one of the workers tells Henry to wish his mother a happy birthday. But it's not her birthday, it's her wedding anniversary, which she still takes very seriously, despite her husband being deceased. Henry has forgotten the anniversary and has to pick up some flowers on the way to his mother's home.
Yes.
Which is his home as well, actually, which I realised afterwards.
Tom takes Shirley home and offers to take her upstairs for a quick one.
Yes.
Exact words. She doesn't want to because she's visiting to meet his mum. Now, this house, much like the apartment in The Nanny, is very gothic.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the apartment, which is quite amusing to say apartment in The Nanny, because it looked like a big mansion, was very hammer gothic. This is the house in this. It's gothic, but it's like if you're gothic, but you throw in a colourful house party to celebrate, I don't know, the latest episode of Jay McDonald.
Yeah.
Just something, you know what I mean? It's very bright.
Yeah, so it's
Interesting
fairly
decor.
modern and kitsch
Yeah.
to a certain degree, but it's obvious that they've come from old money.
Yes.
Because it's clearly a very old house that's been kept up, you know, and
Yeah.
the idea is that she's a very rich bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately,
Tom asks Shirley to do a song on the piano, but she doesn't want to. He informs her that his mum will throw a pot at her if she refuses to perform for her, and she says she'll throw it right back. So immediately you know that if Bette Davis is going to be a handful, this Shirley's going to give her it right back.
yes. We get a little bit of sexism, a little bit of misogyny, because that's the theme today. When Tom says she doesn't like it when she can't get her way, it brings out her feminine side.
Yes.
Lovely.
He then shows off his mum's trophy cabinet, which includes his first tooth, one of Terry's nappies, and a prize that Tom won on Brighton Pier.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one's very British.
Very
I mean,
British.
like, the Nanny is British in a Hollywood sense. This is British in a, oh no, this is actually British kind of way.
Yeah, there's only a few years between them,
Mm-hmm.
but this feels very 60s.
Yeah.
Very Britain in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And I think maybe because it's in colour, so the costumes are different, and there's more of an emphasis on the sort of differences between the characters
Yeah.
and the age differences and such, if you know what I mean. It's very much Tom and Shirley are young, swinging 60s, wanting to shag on the sofa and all that business. And in many ways, the Bette Davis character, Mrs. Taggart, is old-fashioned. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Henry arrives, and Tom reveals that their mum doesn't know Shirley's staying. And Henry seems concerned about this, and Shirley offers to leave, but Tom insists that she stays. And asks if his mum knows that she's pregnant. This is something else that he hasn't told her. This film is absolutely filled with melodrama.
Yes.
It's like an episode of EastEnders on speed.
It is. It is.
Karen, Terry, and their 5 kids arrive at the house. Terry gives Tom a telling off because he's worried he'll steal the spotlight from some news that he has to tell their mother. And then we get the moment.
So yes, the big moment. Madam X makes her big arrival down the stairs to the love song from the opening credits. And we say Madam X, of course, as a reference to Madonna, but it's Bette Davis.
I hope anyone listens to this podcast knows the reference.
With an eye patch.
Yes.
And this is the big from all the marketing. This was a big deal. This is her face with this eye patch on the poster, laughing maniacally. Bette Davis adds another portrait in evil as the most merciless mother of them all. And remember, mum's the word for depravity.
Yes. She's an emasculating woman whose husband, a successful building contractor, has been dead for 10 years. And it's her annual celebration of her wedding anniversary. So Henry puts the music on. She does a dance whilst walking down the stairs with a pink dress, pink eye patch, and pearl necklaces. And it is just such a huge sleigh. It really is. I was absolutely living for it. It's like, that is how you make your entrance. She is RuPaul walking into the workroom, and the library is well and truly open. She does not hold back, and the rest of this film is just her reading people to filth. That is all this film is.
It is. Because the marketing makes it out like she's going to start murdering people, this, that, and the other. But really, the whole film is her being awful to people insulting them.
If words could murder, it'd be a massacre.
Exactly. And it's from the get-go. The library's open from the get-go. They're talking and they're talking about Henry, and Karen says, Henry's pushing 40, Mum. And Mrs. Taggart says, he happens to be waiting for the right girl, not like some I know that marries the first tart that winks them into the nearest bed. Eh, Terry? No, I've given her a bit of a British accent. I can't do a Bette Davis impression.
No.
Peter. Oh, no, I can't. Peter.
She asks if Shirley is one of Karen's kids from an older marriage.
Yeah.
Tom has brought... Well, first she asks Tom if he wants Shirley to stay. Tom has brought his mum a statue of a boy that squirts water out of his dick, and she loves it. She thinks it's hilarious. Funniest thing she's ever seen.
It's a strange choice for an anniversary gift, but she seems to be enjoying it.
She's fuming that her grandkids are staying over, and thinks they're only interested in her for what she's buying them. She reminds Karen that she only had 3 kids, and she says this by saying, I had 3 chicks of my own. Only 3, I grant you, Karen. But natural good manners tell me when to put the plug in.
Yeah.
Whoever wrote this, I mean, we know who wrote this film. Whoever wrote the play must be homosexual.
Potentially.
I mean, only the gays can write reads like this.
It's potentially. What was his name?
The guy who wrote the play.
Yeah, Bill McIlraith.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe.
After Mrs. Taggart leaves the room, Karen informs Shirley that they won't have to put up with Mrs. Taggart much longer as they're moving to Canada. Terry and Tom bicker about this, and Karen tells Tom off because Terry's sensitive. Shirley informs her that Tom's sensitive too, to which Karen says, I'm not talking about being ticklish in the long grass, Shirley.
Now, Karen gives Mrs. Taggart a run for her money.
She does.
In terms of funny reads.
Yeah.
Tom and Karen briefly joke about setting the house on fire whilst Mrs. Taggart sleeps, and Shirley is rightfully horrified. So this is, again, this idea is that they might kill their mum.
Yeah. Because
she's so awful and so horrible. It comes up a couple of times, and it's Tom and Karen who are sort of the main ones talking about this, and it appears in the trailer and everything, and you know, the mother of all horrifying women, and they're gonna kill her off. Spoiler alert: it doesn't happen, but
no.
You know, it's high camp when it's in the trailer. Mrs. Taggart soon tires of her grandchildren and sends them home.
She gives them some money, and one of them kisses her, and she wipes it off immediately, looking disgusted.
Henry obliges to drive them home, and Mrs. Taggart tells him the world is better for having him in it. Henry is clearly mother's favourite, in a very Norman Bates kind of way.
Yeah. She asks Henry when Tom's wedding is with Little Miss Bag of Bones.
Yeah.
To which Henry reassures her that Shirley seems nice, and she says, I'm sure she is for someone else's son. Yeah, so she escorts them to the car and informs Karen that they need to go home or they'll wreck the bar. And Mrs. Taggart informs Shirley that if they were Roman Catholics, Henry would make a great pope.
Karen's got a little bit of an issue with Mrs. Taggart giving the kids money. She says, I wish you wouldn't give them pocket money. They'll only buy ice cream and they got their ration for today. Mr. Taggart said, ration? What are you preparing them for? The next war? Do they sleep in the underground and wear gas masks around the house? You're a hard mother, Karen. Very hard. Karen says, that's how I want their teeth to be, Mum. Good and hard. Which Mrs. Taggart replies, now don't put words in my mouth. I didn't say good. I don't think you are a good mother. But it's not my place to say so. I love this kind of dialogue in films. It kind of reminds me of the classic Hollywood way quippy one-liners
Yeah.
and reads, and there's no, and I don't wish to age myself because we all love a bit of vulgarity, but there's not a massive amount of vulgarity in it.
No.
It's, it's still not, I wouldn't say pleasant, but do you understand what I
know what you
mean?
I know what you mean. Mrs. Taggart invites Shirley to sit next to her so she could take a good look at her. And she says, Tommy's taste is changing. He used to like a lot of flesh. You wouldn't fetch much on the butcher's slab. Shirley informs her that they're going to get married. Mrs. Taggart describes how their wedding will go before suggesting that Tom won't turn up because he loves being a centre of attention.
Will it be a white wedding, my dear? Yes, it will. How many bridesmaids? 2, all in yellow, and they'll each carry a bouquet, and you'll carry a prayer book, and the bells will ring ting-a-ling, and you'll be so happy, and we'll all be so very sympathetic when Tommy doesn't turn up. I feel like this episode's going to be just us reading this dialogue. It's just too good. I don't want to miss out on any of it.
She also says, Shirley, my dear, would you mind sitting somewhere else? Body odour offends me. Shirley is fuming at this and informs her she doesn't have body odour but storms off.
Terry and his mother argue over the new house builds. She's put a lot of restrictions on times to get the new houses made, and Terry and his workers cannot keep up. Not being able to take criticism or disagreement, that's when Mrs. Taggart changes the subject by insinuating that Shirley has BO.
Mrs. Taggart surprises Karen and Terry by telling them she's brought them a new house for £15,000. And Tom is fuming and keeps telling Terry to ask them for the receipt. Karen tells Terry to tell her about them moving to Canada, and he refuses, so she tells her straight out. And she brings Shirley into it, Mrs. Taggart. She says, you see, Shirley, Terry was never a leader. He was always led. And now he's being led to Canada by that pregnant cow over there. Hearing Bette Davis calls someone a pregnant cow, that's how I count.
Mrs. Taggart also worries what Terry will do for work over in Canada. She says, a carpenter? You can't hammer a nail in without being rushed to hospital with a broken thumb. Who built that broom cupboard behind the door so you had to walk into the kitchen sideways? The only thing you're good at is making shavings. 2 weeks in Canada and you'll be deported for sabotage. Tom and Terry both come for Mrs. Taggart and her handling of the family business since her husband died. So they're all getting a little defensive and a little argumentative now. And again, her emphasis on speed has led to them building shoddy houses. And Terry in particular feels like a con man. The argument is interrupted by a call where Mrs. Taggart is informed that Henry and the children have been in a crash. She says, that was the cottage hospital. Henry's been in a crash. The car overturned. Karen says, what about the kids, Mum? She says, oh, poor Henry, they're operating on him. But the kids, Mum, what about the kids? I'm afraid their condition is critical.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's just too good. And then deliver. I'm not doing it justice. Of course, I'm no Bette Davis. I'm not a 2-time Oscar winner and, legend of the silver screen. But it's so hilarious, this dialogue.
The film takes a bit of a sour turn at this point. When Shirley goes up to her room and finds Henry there, she comes down screaming and Mrs. Taggart casually strolls out of the room. She tells Tom that, this isn't the sound, this is hilarious. She tells Tom that it was a phone call from someone asking about one of the houses her company's building. And she says, it's an eye for an eye, so Karen knows what it's like to lose her son. So funny. Really dark humour, but hilarious.
Yes.
The sour note is when Shirley tells Mrs. Taggart that Henry was wearing her clothes. And Mrs. Taggart says, you should take that as a compliment. He only wears clothes that are clean and pretty. He's very particular, my son. That's great. She's very supportive of her son being potentially trans. Great. Very progressive. The way the story goes really drags it down and isn't so progressive.
It's yeah. So the idea, I believe that he's a transvestite,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got what they describe as problems,
Yeah.
and it goes hand in hand with him wanting to dress in women's clothing.
Yeah.
And we never, thankfully, we never see this, so
Mhm.
it's never played for laughs necessarily in the big reveal of him dressed in women's clothing.
No.
But the idea is that his kleptomania, because he only ever wants to wear clothes that he's stolen, the kleptomania and the him being a transvestite go hand in hand.
Yeah.
That's where, for me, the depiction is very iffy and very dated.
Yeah, and it's very much discussed like it's a common knowledge that because he dresses in women's clothes, he's a pervert, and
Yes,
you
it's
know,
something to be ashamed of.
Yeah, it's very much a product of 1968, and is by far the worst thing about this film.
Yeah, but it is the kind of thing that if it came out would ruin his life.
Yeah.
And I mean that is a fact. You know,
but it's the fact that it's all played for laughs.
Except it's either played for laughs or it's insinuated that him wanting to wear women's clothing makes him a pervert, makes him, mentally ill, makes him someone to be shamed.
Yeah.
That's the issue, obviously.
They all go out for dinner. Mrs. Taggart tells Shirley all about her great sense of humour. A guy shows up at the dinner table and is fuming that Terry didn't put all of his floorboards down. Terry refuses to do it and threatens to punch him in the face, so they have a brief little fight. Mrs. Taggart signals the waiter to bring the anniversary cake out. It's huge, pink, and has so much candles.
It does.
It's just as flamboyant as her outfit. Mrs. Taggart tells the angry customer to bring his family to the restaurant and she'll pay for them all to have dinner while she gets someone to go out and put down their floorboards. She's then disgusted to find out that the little squirt, in her words, has 7 kids.
Yeah. 9? Who would have thought a little squirt like that would have 7 children?
She tells Henry to go and fix the floorboards, and before we know it, we're back at the house. But yes, it's again, Bette Davis calling someone a little squirt is the sort of camp I need in my life. Back at the house, Henry returns Shirley's clothes to her room and apologizes to her. They have a conversation that actually starts off really sweet, until Shirley suggests that Henry goes to see a psychiatrist. He tells her he doesn't need to because dressing in women's clothes doesn't do no harm to anyone else, before explaining that if he didn't do it, who knows what else he'd end up doing. And these little things where it's like, at the start of that scene, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe we are going to be progressive, and it's like, no, we're not.
Yeah. And I maybe it's a reference to that sort of Norman Bates Psycho-esque, it being maybe part of some greater aggression, or he could become violent if he doesn't dress in women's clothing. It's all very iffy, and yes, of course it's of the time, but we have someone like Shirley who's actually in part quite understanding about the whole thing, and then turns quickly and says, oh wow, we all have our idiosyncrasies, but yours should probably be sorted out.
Yeah. When Henry's walking down the stairs, he's like, excuse me, Karen, I've got to go and lay those floorboards. To which she says, make the most of it, mate, that's all you'll ever lay.
Yeah, and again, the idea is that Henry is probably a virgin, never been in a relationship, under his mum's thumb for all these years, and it's played for laughs, of course, but it is, again, it's a bit iffy, isn't it? The Henry character in general, I'm not sure what to make of him. Is he a homosexual or is he not? Yeah, it's iffy.
Karen goes to visit Shirley in her room to bitch about Mrs. Taggart, and Karen warns Shirley that her time will come with her and gives her advice on how to deal with her. So Shirley says she can handle her and that she plans on being the boss in her marriage.
Karen isn't so sure. That's gonna work out for old Shirley.
Her and Tom have another fantasy about how to get rid of Mrs. Taggart, to which they are caught when Mrs. Taggart appears on the stairs with a costume change.
Yes.
An amazing green dress and now a black eye patch. She even changed her eye patch.
Serving in green.
She opens the door to her dead husband's office, which has a big portrait of him, and Tom tells her how they're all sick of her. She informs them all that Terry isn't going to Canada, and that if she goes, she'll let everyone know about their secret.
Yes.
Their secret being that they have an agreement.
I'm just thinking, tell her about this, their secret, and I'm like, doesn't she tell them the secret straight away anyway?
She does. Okay. Yeah.
Like, blackmail doesn't really work like that.
She does. She tells them that Terry and her have an agreement that she gives him £1,000 every time he gets Karen pregnant. Tom thinks it's Codswallop, and Karen confirms that it's Codswallop. She tells a story about
anyone not from England, the UK. Google Codswallop.
Yeah,
it's not as rude as it sounds.
She tells a story about her mum and how she had a quiet word with Mrs. Taggart to inform her that she'll give Terry the £1,000 for the kids, but Karen knew about it and says that she was giving them the money for kids that they already wanted. So they were playing her, really. And Karen then reveals that she gave them another £1,000 recently for their latest kid that doesn't exist. Karen isn't really pregnant.
Yes.
So Mrs. Taggart fuming, and she deals with this by threatening to call the police on Henry because of the way he is, and that the only way she won't do it is if Terry doesn't go to Canada.
Yeah, I liked when the idea is that Mrs. Taggart was trying to kill Karen by getting her pregnant so much.
Yeah.
Because Karen's mother had described some sort of heart issue that Karen had. Karen says, when my mother heard that my second baby was on the way, she started on at me about not allowing a decent interval in between. She started going on about my heart. You've got a dicky heart. No, besides, kids come out of me like bullets. But you know, mothers, I was supposed to have had... Kids come out of me like bullets. Ever since then, she's maintained I'm delicate. So I just think it's so funny that Mrs. Taggart was trying to kill her off by making her have 5 kids. But she was fine because kids just come out of her like bullets. There we go.
There we go.
Lovely. What a way to put it.
Karen thinks Henry should go to prison, and Shirley says he shouldn't. But she does think Terry should still go to Canada, to which Mrs. Taggart says, "You're a bit of a cretin on the quiet, aren't you?"
Mrs. Taggart says about Henry, he's getting worse. I can't get inside his room for undies. I'm keeping making him more British. I don't know what voice I'm going for, but imagine Bette Davis saying that.
Mrs. Taggart asks what's false about Shirley before demanding to see her ears. She's horrified.
So fucking stupid.
Horrified by her repulsive boxer's ears.
This is very clearly some like special effects ears, fake ears that have been put on this poor actress to make. They are like rugby player. What's it called? Cauliflower ears. They're like huge, but also clearly very fake. It's high camp.
It is. Mrs. Taggart wants them all to host a toast to the father, and then performs her husband's favourite hymn, Rock of Ages, for everyone. Now the talent show begins.
Yeah, well, before that, she speaks on her husband's behalf when toasting. She says, who's... She's speaking as if it is her deceased husband. Ah, whose is that new face I see? Must be a girlfriend of Tommy's. Strange what men find attractive. And people were like, what a thing to say. I was like, I'm just speaking on his behalf. It's not me, it's him. It's just what he would say.
She demands Terry performs for them.
Beautifully as well.
Plays piano while she lights up a cigarette. She tells Terry to take up piano again because he owes it to culture.
Yes, very nice. Which is still quite supportive of her children.
Yeah.
I think it's just when women become involved that she's not so supportive.
Tom decides to recite a poem for them about a woman forgetting how to say no in bed.
Yes, yes.
And Mrs. Taggart then demands that Shirley performs for them, and she refuses to. Mrs. Taggart informs her that she could stop her getting married to Tom. At first, she tries to make Shirley believe that Tom is already married.
Yes.
And then tells her that he brought a girl called Heather along last year. Shirley's the third girl he's brought to the wedding anniversary, and he only does it to spit in his mother's eye. To which Shirley says, I'd spit in the other one if you had it.
And this is where all shit breaks loose.
Yeah.
She comes for Mrs. Taggart's disability.
Yeah.
And people are genuinely like, why'd you take it so far?
Karen's
What's
like,
that
you
about?
stupid little bitch bringing up the eye.
Exactly.
Mrs. Taggart then gives the backstory about how Terry shot her in the eye as a kid and has never looked her in the eye since.
Yeah, so essentially it was Terry messing about with a BB gun or whatever when he was younger and shot out her eye.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily her coming for her disability. It's the idea that for Mrs. Taggart, who is someone who relishes in emotional blackmail, this is the biggest form of emotional blackmail that she has.
Yeah.
And she hadn't used it until Shirley brought it up.
Yeah.
So Terry, who is prone to feeling very guilty and is feeling very guilty about moving to Canada, this just makes things totally worse.
Yeah.
And Karen knows this, and that's why she calls her a stupid little bitch. Shirley doesn't back down though, does she? She continues to call her old one eye, and she lets her have it. But she may have taken it too far when she tells Mrs. Taggart she has and will be making all the decisions in Tom's life. And he doesn't seem very pleased at the idea of Shirley making all the decisions.
Yeah. She demands Tom leaves with her for a walk, and if she tries stopping her, she'll come back and poke out the other eye.
Yes.
Mrs. Taggart puts on a fur coat.
She fucking does.
And starts letting off some fireworks, whilst Henry breaks into a neighbour's garden to steal some more underwear.
She sets a bonfire as well. It's giving Mink Stole in Pink Flamingos.
It's so camp. Seeing Mrs. Taggart and Bette Davis there in this fur coat outside, setting off fireworks that look like they were just brought from the corner shop. Oh my god. Hilarious.
And it's
so camp.
so random because the house is lovely and big, but the garden's giving me normal British garden. I don't know. I'm assuming they're shot in two wildly different places because it doesn't seem like it's the same house. It seems like the garden I had growing up, you know, and it's like, it's high camp to see Bette Davis. I hope there's some footage somewhere of Bette Davis going around London or, you know, buying fireworks or something like that. Because I don't imagine her really seeing places like that. I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? It's the whole Hollywood thing.
Maybe this was part of the 10 days that the other director filmed.
Maybe.
It's his back garden.
Yeah.
The owners of the house where Henry steals the underwear from start shouting at him as he runs off down the street. The police go after him and find the underwear in Terry's car that Henry was using. So he drops more of the underwear on the street as the police chase after him. Again, all play for laughs, and it's just not funny at all.
Yeah. Also, I don't understand why anyone would leave their washing on the line overnight. Like, it's pitch black now. They should have brought that washing in a lot earlier.
Yeah, we don't have a washing line, so I can't say what I would do, but yeah, no, it seems.
What, did you not have when you were younger?
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
We'd have watched it when we were younger. The amount of trouble I'd get into if I left it out overnight.
Yeah. I suppose as well, you know, where we used to live.
God.
Someone
They'd
probably
steal
would
your
have-
washing line.
they'd
They wouldn't
steal
steal
the
your
washing
underwear.
line. They'd take the whole thing. Tom starts comparing Shirley to his mum, and she's fuming. They have a kiss, and she tells them whatever he wants to do, it's fine with her. So he wants to go and get it on in his mum's bed.
Yeah, he suggests that to make amends, they shag in his mother's bed while she's locked out, wanting to get in. Shirley isn't down with that, understandably, but Tom is adamant that this is what he wants to get one over on his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what he wants, not what Shirley wants, that ultimately counts.
Yeah.
Weirdo.
Yeah.
How strange. Why would... No, I'm not even going to get into it.
I mean, at that point, that's when Shirley should be like, actually, I do not want any of
Red
with this
flag.
family
Yeah.
whatsoever.
You want to have sex whilst your mother is desperate to get into the room.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Henry arrives home and tells Terry that he left the underwear in his car. Mrs. Taggart tells Terry that it's his car, and if the police arrive, she won't tell the police it was Henry and not Terry who was using the car.
To cover for Henry more, Mrs. Taggart grabs the underwear from Henry's room and burns it on the bonfire.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a lot.
It is.
She empties drawers and it's full of women's underwear. Henry believes Terry should take the blame, but Terry is understandably reluctant.
Mm-hmm.
It did make me laugh because Henry's like, well, if you go, get into trouble for this, it's a first offence, so you probably won't have to go to prison. But if I get into trouble for this, it's my first offence, and I won't go to prison. But when I inevitably do it again, that'll be my second offence.
Yeah.
So that did make me laugh. It was a bit like, okay, a bit privileged here.
Tom informs his mother that he and Shirley are going to bed, so she asks for a kiss. In a bizarre series of events, he gives her a peck on the cheek, and she grabs his face and snogs him before looking at Shirley and saying, "Follow that if you can."
She then says, "Shirley, if the police come, keep out of the way. I don't want them to think I'm running a house of ill repute."
Henry tells Shirley to walk away while she can, and she reveals to the room that she's pregnant. Shirley asks Mrs. Taggart if she cares about the baby, and she's like, "No, I keep seeing it with your ears."
Yeah. She can give two shits.
Terry thinks it's a good idea that he doesn't go to Canada. Meanwhile, Shirley and Tom start having sex in his mum's room. Terry confirms they're not going, and Karen's like, "You had a good anniversary, haven't you?" And Mrs. Taggart says, "Oh, it's not over yet." And she tells the couple that she wants an IOU for £5,000, which they agreed to.
Yeah, and she gets Karen to sign.
Yeah. Shirley gets on the bed and screams when she finds Mrs. Taggart's glass eye.
On the pillow.
Yeah. Mrs. Taggart casually tells Terry and Karen about this. And Tom runs out of the room and informs his mum that a glass eye has given Shirley a miscarriage.
Yeah, this is a bit of a what the fuck
Yeah.
moment. It's like, okay, are we playing this for laughs?
Mm-hmm.
It was strange. Mrs. Taggart calls the police to report Terry's car stolen.
Yeah.
Because she's a clever bitch. And Karen is the only one to go comfort Shirley. And Tom asks his mother if Shirley will be okay. To which Mrs. Taggart says... he says she seemed to be in a lot of pain. Mrs. Taggart says, "Not pain, dear, just discomfort. Like hay fever." I don't think. Very strange.
Mrs. Taggart informs Terry that he has to get back to work in the morning on the new office block that they're building. She's put on more work for them because of the way they've treated her. And Karen informs them it's a false alarm. Shirley actually didn't have a miscarriage. They all confront Mrs. Taggart now for going too far this time. She turns the blame on Nem for letting her bully Shirley all night, which they did.
They did to a certain degree. Yeah, they never really came to Shirley's defense.
No.
They were too interested in defending themselves, I suppose, and trying to get one over on Mrs. Taggart.
Yeah, Karen tells Mrs. Taggart how desperate she wants her dead, and Mrs. Taggart says, "My God, she's scummy, green with envy." Karen tells Tom to leave with Shirley, and he does after telling Henry that he could be his best man or his bridesmaid at his wedding.
Yes.
And if you...
Which sounds progressive,
I know,
but...
if you ignore everything else that happened before that point.
Yeah, but it comes across as a joke.
Mrs. Taggart informs Terry she's never cared for him, and he tells her that he won't be coming to work for her because he, Karen, and the kids are going to Canada. They leave, and Henry goes for his bath.
Yeah, Henry goes... So, clearly Henry's still living at home. He goes upstairs to get a bath, and Mrs. Taggart reads him one last time. She says, "Oh, Henry, who was that mucky French artist who used to paint fat women getting in and out of the baths?" "I don't know, Mum. Why?" "Oh, never mind." So she kind of fat shames him, and he's actually fat shamed a couple of times in the film, and I don't think he looks that big.
No.
Really. Yeah, but it's the last read of the film. It's a shame, really, to sort of end on a bit of fat shaming, but yeah, I thought I had to include it as it's the last read.
Yes. She gets on the phone to her solicitor and asks them to start legal proceedings in the morning for the IOU from Terry and to give £5,000 to Shirley. Mrs. Taggart says goodbye to her husband until next year, leaves his office and starts playing with her pissing statue whilst laughing. And that's the anniversary. Yeah. So, yeah, Mrs. Taggart, she also tells the solicitor to inform the Canadian immigration people that an IOU is outstanding in Terry and Karen's names. Yeah. So she gets her way in the end. Yeah. Yeah.
Eventually. So...
It's such a shame that this has a bit of the dated aspects to it, because, I mean, apart from that, this is fantastic.
It is. It's really... So much of it is very witty, very funny, very camp, acted really well. Obviously, Bette Davis, this is more of an exaggerated character for her, one that she's quite well known for, sharp, witty, a little villainous as well. Great performance from her, but I also think the rest of the cast gave fantastic performances, and you could tell that they were seasoned actors, and a lot of them had performed on the stage in these roles as well, which I think really helped.
Yeah.
I think, what was her name? Shirley. What was her name? Excuse me. Sheila Hancock. Apologies. I thought she was absolutely fantastic, and more than gave Bette Davis a run for her money when they're scenes together. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, apart from those iffy moments, and it just leaves a sort of sour taste in the mouth, unfortunately.
Yeah. For ratings, I give it 7 reading sessions with Madam X out of 10.
I give it 7 offensive cases of body odour out of 10.
Masterpiece, trash, basic, or a camp hole bunch of fun. This is a camp hole bunch of fun.
Camp hole bunch of fun.
It's available on DVD and video on demand, and if you enjoyed this, I recommend checking out Monster-in-Law.
Nice. If you enjoyed this, I recommend checking out Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
With that being said, let's get to the awards. So, for our regular listeners, these are our usual awards, but instead of giving them to each film, this will be as a whole. So, the winner for Biggest Queen, for me, is Mrs. Taggart in The Anniversary.
Mrs. Taggart in The Anniversary.
When you're able to read people, constantly like that without even thinking about it, you've got to be the biggest queen.
Absolutely, and to serve a look as well.
I have some ties. Biggest gasp. It's a tie between Joey pretending to hang himself in The Nanny
Mm.
and Mrs. Taggart snogging her son in The Anniversary.
Do you know what? I completely agree. I went with Joey pretending to hang himself, but no, I completely agree on both of those.
And my next tie is best dialogue. So I have Nanny from The Nanny and all of Mrs. Taggart's insults in The Anniversary.
I did think I just could not narrow it down. I did think maybe the BO one or the pregnant cow.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I completely agree. Or everything, all the reads.
And that's camp. It has to go to her Mrs. Taggart's big entrance in The Anniversary.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and just the way she looked was
Yeah.
high camp. Just her existence was high camp.
So if you're a fan of either of these films, let us know which one you prefer. We are Horror Cult Trash over on Facebook and Instagram, Horror Cult Trash on Twitter. I'm dead at Gaz92 on Letterboxd, Gazmo205 on Instagram, and GazCruise92 on Twitter.
I'm Chris Barker 823 on Letterboxd and Instagram.
And go check out Gasp Horror Festival across all social media. We are accepting submissions now for next year's festival. Give us a rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, like and follow on everything else. Give us a rating on Spotify. Do you have a conclusion you'd like to do about Bette Davis and her range between these two films as a whole?
In terms of how much a fantastic actress she was,
Yeah.
that she could do comedy and very serious acting. Yeah. I mean, to me, she's one of my favorite actresses, and I really want to go through all of her films. And I just think she can do camp, she can do serious. Yeah, what do you think?
No, I completely agree. It's interesting for me as well looking at Hammer. Because obviously
Okay.
the big focus of this episode is Bette Davis, but the episode is Bette Davis at Hammer. And for me, it was interesting looking at two films that are completely different to the mainstream view of Hammer. Obviously, we've seen some of the older films as well when they were at Columbia, but you know, this is after Columbia, and it's just it's bizarre to me that everyone knows them for Dracula, mostly Prince of Darkness, Dracula, and you know Frankenstein, the Mummy, etc. They have like little gems like this stashed away as well.
Yeah, I know. I do think both of the films were marketed as if they were horror films.
Yeah.
As if Bette Davis was recreating Baby Jane and very much playing off of that. Which is interesting, but you get something completely different when you watch the film. That's kind of, you know, again, tale as old as time when it comes to film marketing. I just think that, you know, like I said earlier, Bette Davis has consistently been the best thing in everything I've ever seen her in. And these two films are no exception. Yeah. I do think that if somebody else played the parts, I might not be sat here giving it a round of applause. But she is, and I am.
Next week, we are discussing 4 films that you might not be giving a round of applause to. We will be discussing the Wishmaster franchise in the Wishmaster Through the Years episode.
I don't really know too much, so I don't know what to expect.
Well, I loved the first one.
Right.
Which I watched when I was a lot younger. I knew it as a classic, a modern classic. I felt like everyone knew what it was. I knew about it when it first came out, when I wasn't really, you know, I was a bit too young to be fully into horror. Everyone knew about it. Did you not?
I'd heard of it, but I'm gonna be honest, I thought it was the Christopher Walken films. But that's The Prophecy, isn't it?
That's The Prophecy.
So I'm misremembering Wishmaster. Yeah. So
it's a blockbuster classic.
Right, okay.
And we'll be diving into all 4 films.
Awful.
And probably the sequels that will be awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be back same time, same place next week.
Bye.